Hey, Matt. All right. First of all, second, so what are we talking about here? I don't know. No. So we're going to talk about religious people have more morals than atheists. Now, my argument is not going to be that religious people are immoral people, but rather, and no, I think serious Christian would argue that an atheist is an immoral person, but rather that atheism itself means there are no morals whatsoever. So evil implies good, and I've argued this before. Good implies moral law. Moral law implies a moral lawgiver. All of this requires an all-perfect standard. If there is no God, there is no all-perfect standard. There is no moral standard by which we must keep. So, and so, again, not that atheists are immoral people, but rather there is no morality at all. For Paul says that morality is written on man's heart. So, as Dawkins says, the reason we have religions and morals and moral thoughts within ourselves is because something is wrong or flawed with the software of man, right? So, no God, no evil, no good, etc. No such thing as good and evil. As he says, quote, "Is no such thing as good and evil. It is all of us damned. For if we are all animals, all things are permissible." So again, I repeat, my argument here is not that atheists are immoral people, rather amoral people. They have no morals. There is no moral standard when you base your system on a world without God. And I'll read a little bit of Nietzsche's "God is Dead." We are his murderers, but how have we done this? How are we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained the earth from its sun? Whither it is moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not perpetually falling backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up, down, left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Hasn't it not become colder? Is it not more and more night coming on all the time? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition, etc.? And so what he's saying there is, without God, there is no moral standard. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic, and I'll get to more on that later.
Awesome. All right. So can you hear me? Okay, awesome. So just to start off, thanks for taking this debate. I really look forward to our discussion. Before I get into my main case or my points, I'd first like to just talk about a couple of definitions of the resolution. So the resolution is that religious people have more morals than atheists. So first off, we have to realize that it's talking about you have more morals, not better morals. And so more is defined as greater in number. So, my challenge for you, Nelson, is you have to prove that religious people, not just Christians, because the resolution does say religious people as a whole have more morals than atheists. It can't just be better morals, because morals aren't necessarily just something that is good. It's a stance on something, which actually getting to that, the definition of moral from the Oxford Dictionary is a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and is not acceptable for them to do. So my reason to prefer this definition is simply this. So in this debate, we are talking about religions from all over the world, from throughout history. We're also talking about atheism. There are numerous different religious definitions of, what is moral, but it completely differs. We have to look at a standard definition of moral, and that's what Oxford Dictionary provides. So getting into my arguments, I have two basic ones. So my first argument is going to be that the numerical amounts of morals, how exactly do we determine which side numerically has more? And my stance is that you can't, because there is no such thing as one side having more morals, because the fact of the matter is a moral can be good or bad, because a moral stance is a moral is simply a position on an issue that carries moral weight, like abortion or gay marriage, things along those lines. I may believe that abortion is morally wrong, but there are plenty of people that believe abortion is perfectly fine morally, and that's two different stances on the same issue. Both believe that they are morally correct. See, the fact of the matter is, you can look at that example, for instance, and you can come up with two completely opposite but numerically the same morals. See, it doesn't matter really which one is better, because we could have a debate over who has, better morals, but that's not what the resolution is asking us to do. And my second argument is that more rules does not equal more morals. Just because a Christian may have more rules in their belief system doesn't mean that they are more moral. There are many Muslims who have more restrictions in their belief system than Jews, for instance, but that doesn't mean that they are more moral than Jews in of themselves.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Yes, and I agree. Thanks for taking the debate. I just got right into it. And I prefer the dancing. I prefer to hold hands. But so I agree. I think we're trying to look at who has the most morals, and I think one is greater than none. And as I will argue, is that atheists have no morals whatsoever. Moral standard in an atheistic world. Again, I go to Nietzsche in Twilight of the Idols. Quote, when one gives up the Christian faith, one pulls the right to Christian morality out from under one's feet. The morality is by no means self-evident. Christianity is a system, a whole view of things thought out together. By breaking one main concept out of it, the faith in God, one breaks the whole. So in his God is Dead, what he's saying is that without a God, you're detaching the world from its sun. So you're just moving around on this ever-moving platform. There is no foundation for anything. I read another thing. Since we're all animals, just animals, no God, remember. Why can't we just have sex publicly, whenever, wherever, however? Are not we all animals? If from an atheistic worldview, we're just animals. Animals have sex out in the open, yet somehow man thinks that it's wrong to have sex out in the open. And I think everybody pretty much would agree with that, but that's inconsistent under an atheistic worldview, because an atheistic worldview has no foundation. There are no morals. I could read from murderers of all murderers, how we console ourselves. That which is the holiest and mightiest of all the world has yet possessed is bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe his blood from our blades? And so what he's saying is that we threw God off the bridge, but we want to keep a hold of universal truth and universal morality. But without a God, there is no such thing. I could read Chesterton, G.K. Chesterton, The Man in Revolt. The new rebel is a skeptic. He will not entirely trust anything. He has no loyalty. Therefore, he can never really be a revolutionist. And the fact that he doubts everything really gets in his way when he wants to denounce anything. For all denunciation implies a moral doctrine of some kind. And the modern revolutionist doubts not only the institution he denounces, but the doctrine by which he denounces it. As a politician, he will cry out that war is a waste of life. And then as a philosopher, that all life is a waste of time. A Russian pessimist will denounce a policeman for killing a peasant and then prove by the highest philosophical principles that the peasant ought to have killed himself. The man of this school goes first to the political meeting where he complains that savages are treated as if they were beasts. Then he takes his hat and umbrella and goes into a scientific meeting where he proves that they practically are beasts. In short, the modern revolutionist, being an infinite skeptic, is always engaged in undermining his own minds. In his book on politics, he attacks men for trampling on morality.
So just to start off, I'd like to touch back on, discussing the resolution and the specific wording of it. So you read a lot of examples talking about Christian morality and talking about, God specifically. However, I would like to touch back to the fact that we're discussing religious people as a whole. We aren't just talking about Christianity, and you talked about Christian morality and Christian morals. And the fact of the matter is, we aren't just looking at Christian morals. We're looking at Hindu morals. We're looking at Jewish morals. We're also looking, at Sikh morals. We're looking at morals just, across the scale. We aren't just looking at Christianity. We're looking at religion versus atheism, not Christianity versus atheism. Secondly, I'd like to point out, just because, you're reading quotes from, some famous atheists does not mean that the majority of atheists today don't have morals, or, doesn't mean that they don't believe in anything morally. It's still very, very possible to have a moral stance on something and not believe in God. I'd also like to point back to the fact that that you didn't refute, my definition of moral from Oxford Dictionary. So, I'd like to go forward and use that as the definition of what is a moral in today's round. And, thirdly, Nelson, you still haven't shown how, religious people as a whole have more morals than atheists. You've talked about how, Christianity has, more morals, but we're not just talking about Christianity. We're talking about, religion as a whole. And also, we have to point out that, again, a moral is not just, a good thing. A moral, it's taking a stance on, a standard of behavior. It's taking a stance on your belief. As, the definition says, a moral is a person's standard of behavior, concerning what is or is not acceptable for them. That's what a moral is. And, looking at abortion, for instance, I can say, abortion is morally wrong. That is a stance that I am against. However, there may be other people out there who say, no, abortion is, completely, it's morally okay. I'm for it. That's two stances on the same issue. They're completely opposite morally, but they're numerically exactly the same. There is one moral stance on the other. There's two of the same. There's one and one. Just because one may be better does not numerically make it more valuable.
Okay, so let me look. The definition of moral, concerned with the principles of right and wrong behavior and the goodness or badness of human character. So if we're talking about a right and wrong behavior, we're implying moral standards, a moral law. Well, moral law requires a moral lawgiver. It is a prescriptive item. So if we say Christianity being a subset of the religions, and Christianity being just one religion, one element in that subset, or one element in that set, and it has at least one moral because it believes there is an ultimate right and wrong. Religion being the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. So again, religion, Christianity being a element in that set, and Christianity having at least one moral, whereas atheism having no basis in morality whatsoever, because there is no foundation for right and wrong, therefore having no morals. Therefore, the set of religious, not just Christian, has at least one moral, and atheism has no morals. And again, I'm not saying atheists are immoral people. I'm saying that atheism has no morality, no basis in morality. And that's my entire argument here, is that, and so therefore one being greater than zero, I think I've shown that religious people have more morals than atheists, one being greater than zero. And so again, I just point to the definition of moral, concern the principles of right and wrong behavior and the goodness or badness of human character. If we were to say that morals is just what an individual believes, then I would say that there are more religious people in this world than there are atheists in the world, and therefore the number of people, the number of religious people outnumbers the number of atheists. So you could look at the total number of morals, each person being one moral unit would be outnumbered by religious people. But again, that's not what I'm arguing here. What I'm arguing here is that atheism has no basis in morality. Therefore, atheists have no legitimate foundation for morality whatsoever. And therefore, only the religious person can actually base their behavior in a moral foundation.
All right, so jumping straight into the definition. So I believe that's either the third or fourth definition of moral or morality that you've offered up in this round. And you haven't really given a specific reason to prefer any one of those three. Looking at my definition of moral, it's a person's standard of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and is not acceptable for them to do. And because we are looking at a worldwide scale, we aren't looking at Christianity's, idea of morality. We aren't looking at, Buddhism's idea of morality. We're looking at, religion as a whole. Do they have more morals than people? We have to realize that, religion as a whole, yes, there are more religious people out there. That is 100% correct. However, we still don't really have a system to determine a numerical amount of, how much is a moral worth. What is, is this stance count as one moral, one moral stance. However, just looking back at, those definitions, you keep saying that atheists, they aren't immoral people, but they don't have any morals really because there is no God. However, you haven't really given a reason to prefer any of your definitions. I believe you've given, 3 different definitions of what is moral or what is a moral stance. So we're seeing multiple different, ideas coming, from you on this point. And, we have to realize that, this one definition from Oxford is, what we need to be focusing on. And we have to determine, how, is there a numerical superiority for religious people? And according to that definition, which we have been using, and you didn't challenge in your last speech after I brought up this definition, there cannot be a numerical superiority, because taking a stance on the issue, there's going to be 2 stances on an issue, meaning, there's going to be one stance that is immoral and one stance that is moral, but both of those are still moral stances, regardless of whatever side you're on. So there's still an equal amount of moral stances going on. And so we have to realize, just because, you may have more rules in Christianity, or you may have more rules in Islam, doesn't necessarily mean you have more morals, because those things that you are morally convicted on, someone else is also an atheist, also has that moral stance. And so, for example, talking back to abortion again, there's 2 different stances on the same issue.
So I only defined morality once, and it was concerned with the principles of right and wrong behavior and the goodness and the badness of human character. So what I'm saying is that morality is basically, it's good and evil. So I think that's the only time I actually defined morality, was in my second set there, after you defined your version the first time. And what I'm saying is that an atheist is an amoral person. That means he has no morals. He has no foundation for morals, because he doesn't believe that there is any supreme being. And to have morals, to have a moral law, it requires a moral law giver. And again, atheism has no foundation for that. And so what I'm saying here is that not just Christianity, but religion, and I could talk about specifically Christianity because it just kind of makes it simpler. I'm talking about one religion here, but one religion as a subset of all religions, having at least one morality, one moral law, means that there is at least one moral law in the set of religions. When we look at the set of atheists, there is no foundation for a moral law, because there is no moral lawgiver. Moral law it is a prescriptive law and requires a moral lawgiver. Atheism has no moral lawgiver, and therefore they have no moral law, a universal moral law declaring what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. And so their set of morals is 0, and 1 being greater than 0. I think I've shown that religious people have more morals than atheists.
All right, awesome. So essentially, what I believe, you're saying is that atheists don't follow a moral code because atheists don't have, a God to get that moral code from. Is that correct? Sorry.
What I'm saying is that the Christian worldview, and again, I'm speaking from the Christian worldview as one specific religion. against an anti-religious view, or no religion, a religious view, right? And the Christian worldview is that man as a whole has a moral law written on their hearts. So we follow the Christian view of morality, but that the atheist, in their worldview, there is no such thing as morality. Therefore, at least at the philosophical level, the atheist has no morals by which they can follow. Therefore, Christians having at least one moral, being religious, atheists having no moral law, therefore they have no morals whatsoever.
Awesome. Okay, so that actually does clear stuff up quite a bit. So essentially, the thing is, yes, atheists, they don't have a God per se. They don't have, something to base their morals in, because, they don't believe in a God. However, that exactly is the thing. Atheists don't claim to have, morals set by, God. They don't claim to have the same morals, as, these religious types of people. They don't claim to believe in an objective moral law set down by a God. They have their own beliefs. They have their own opinions on things. They have, their own moral stances that they take. Again, going back to that definition, concerning what is or is not acceptable for them personally to do. And, that's what taking a moral stance is. It's something that you believe in because of, what you were taught, what you believe in, whether your religion, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be religious. Atheists don't believe in religion, but they have their own moral code. Every single person has, a different moral code, even, within religion. Different people within a religion have different moral codes. And the fact of the matter is, just because atheists don't have a God to set a moral code doesn't mean that a moral code doesn't exist for them per se. And again, going back to, the numerical count of these morals, what, I haven't really addressed in the past couple of speeches, but essentially is that, regardless of, the stance, regardless of who gives out that moral code, there's still going to be two stances on that moral code. And, I touched on it a little bit in my opener, but essentially looking at two sides of an issue. Gay marriage is another one that's come up recently. Even political issues. I'm sure, you and Nelson, both you and I disagree on some political issues as well. And I disagree, on some political issues, morally speaking. Daniel, for example, disagrees on some political issues, morally speaking, or he may disagree on other issues, for moral reasons. But the fact of the matter is, I take my moral code, from my religion. You take your moral code from your religion. However, atheists don't take their moral code from a religion. They take it, from something else, from their own personal set of beliefs that they have developed. The fact of the matter is, a moral code does not have to come from a God.
So I think in actuality, I read your little bio there, and I think we'd actually agree on a lot of stuff here. So hopefully we can get to chat on a future debate. But if an individual can be a moral law within themselves, they cannot actually believe that, because they want to impose their own moral codes on others. Therefore, they don't actually believe that each individual can be their own moral self-guidance. And so I think that argument there is flawed, because every atheist wants to impose their own morality on other, both religious and atheists. Therefore, they don't actually believe that morality comes from within and that each individual can guide themselves. They too understand that morality comes from without, that morality requires a transcendent moral lawgiver, whether it be God or it be some other creator, something. Nietzsche said we needed to create Superman, the Ubermach, right? Because moral laws require some kind of supreme type of being for them to exist. And without now, Nietzsche was not, he never believed in God. He grew up a Christian with a very, and he died insane. But he understood that the idea of God was fundamentally and foundational to the viewpoint that of any type of morality. And without without the idea of God, it's like the earth without a sun. We have to light lanterns in the morning. We have to come up with our own moral codes, but that doesn't work, right? Because nobody actually believes that. Nobody believes that you can be a moral law with in and of yourself. Again, because people want to impose their own moral laws on other people. You know, Hitler had his own moral code, but I don't think anybody wants to say that well, you know, Hitler's morality is fine and dandy because it was within himself. So I hate to bring him up, but so. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic, and then we'll have like a last couple minutes.
Awesome. Okay, so touching on your point about wanting to impose your moral code, I'm not going to say that that's false, but there isn't really any evidence or any real reasoning, really to believe that that is the case, that people are trying to that atheists are trying to impose their beliefs upon other people. I've never met an atheist that is trying to impose their moral code upon someone else. And the same thing goes, talking about Nietzsche. I believe, he may have believed that you have to have a God in order to have morals. And there may be some atheists that do try to impose their moral code upon people, but the fact of the matter is, just because some people do it, just because Nietzsche believes that you need a God for morality, it doesn't mean that all atheists believe that, and it certainly doesn't mean that that's 100% true. The fact of the matter is that the majority of atheists, they have their own moral code. The majority of atheists have morals. They believe in morality, but they don't believe in a God. And, Nietzsche may say that you have to have a God, but, the majority of atheists today don't believe that. And the fact of the matter is, we have to take in, today what atheists believe, not just, what, Nietzsche believed and what he thought atheism was back then.
Great. So, again, I'm saying that atheists, philosophically, in atheism, because they have no transcendent being, they have no basis in morality. They have no basis in reason, because after all, we are just animals. Animals have no basis for reason. They claim that man is above the animals because he can reason, but they have no foundation to make that claim. And so when they claim that morals can be based on reason, they're just circular logic there, just circularly reasoning. And so, again, I just read the end here. In his book on politics, he attacks men for trampling on morality. In his book on ethics, he attacks morality for trampling on men. Therefore, the modern man in revolt has become practically useless for all purposes of revolt. By rebelling against everything, he has lost his right to rebel against anything. And so it's a great quote. But again, I just go back to the idea that while the atheist lives in a religious, or what I would say is a theistic worldview, because he believes in morality. He believes in a universal right and wrong. He believes that eating humans is wrong. He believes that murder is wrong, that rape is wrong. But philosophically, in an atheist viewpoint, there is no morality, there is no wrong, there is no right. And so he's just drifting on feeling. And so what I'm saying is that religious people as a whole, Christianity being a subset of religion, Christianity has a basis for morality, being that they believe in a transcendent being. And philosophically, atheism, being that individuals are just animals and actually come from rocks, are no different than animals. Animals eat each other and have no morals. Therefore, man has no moral foundation.
All right, just to close, I'd like to touch on my definition of moral real quick. It hasn't been discussed in the past couple of speeches, and so just to recap, it's a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and is not acceptable for them to do. Now, this does not mention religion. This doesn't say that you have to have a person to set those moral standards. You don't have to have a God. It's a person's standards of behavior concerning what they personally believe is acceptable for them to do in a specific instance, or in a specific lifestyle. That's what a moral is. And so when we look at atheism, as a whole, these atheists, they still have morals. They still have personal standards of behavior over what is and is not acceptable for them to do. The majority of atheists believe that, rape is wrong. I'm sure, the majority of atheists believe that murder is wrong. Those are moral stances that they have because they have a moral code. You do not have to have a moral code giver in order to have a moral code in yourself.